Hey everyone, and welcome to An Operator's Blog. In this episode, we will be discussing building a US India robotics startup. Joining me for this episode is Abhinav Das, co founder and CEO of Orangewood Labs. Orangewood builds affordable robots that are really easy to deploy and can also be programmed using natural language prompts. The company is headquartered in San Francisco and also has an R&D center in India. Orangewood is one of the OG US India deep tech companies. It went through YC in 2018, and I've seen Abhinav, Akash, and the team really grind it hard to build a company in the US India corridor, and that too in deep tech, which is in any way very, very hard to build. And I think just having conversations over many years, there are a lot of hard fought learnings and lessons and experiences here. So I'm really, really excited, Abhinav, to have you in this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to tell the story, and I hope like it kind of gets to people where they they can like think how to be more ambitious with deep tech.
Great. So let's get right down to it. So Abhinav, I want to start with really the backstory, right, and take you back to almost the pre-day zero days, right? So how did you guys come together as the founding team? How did you kind of identify this problem statement, like really, really early days?
Yeah, so we so we all three of us, me, Akash, and Aditya, we met in Ahmedabad, and it was during our time when I was building my previous company, which we called EVOMO, which is Evolving Mobility. And it basically we were trying to build a truck for rural areas in India, and that was again like very very ambitious. Like nobody in like the early 2010s or sorry late 2010s was trying to build vehicles. Uh, that is more like a post 2015 phenomena. But yeah, we got into this. I was very I was very inspired to see how people in rural areas have build these makeshift jugaad vehicles. Like there's this Hindi word jugaad, which basically means that they'll just make it happen no matter what. So it was very inspiring, and also like something which like that was my what was that movie, Shah Rukh Khan movie about where he's a NASA scientist and goes to a village.
Swades. Yeah.
Swades, yes. That was like my Swades moment, though I was just living 50 kilometers away from that. And I was working at the time, like this is, roughly 2008, when I started working on my previous company, where I saw like these vehicles, and I kind of found that yes, there can be a market there. Plus, it was very socially driven. I think in your 20s, you're very idealist and very socially driven as well. So I was drawn to it. That yeah, I mean, if I can build a truck which can be made in smaller workshops, can become legal, that would improve a lot of lives. And I just went straight into it. And then I got an offer from incubation from NID Ahmedabad, and that's how I went to Ahmedabad. And that's where I met both of them. So Aditya was my roommate. He was a student at NID, and Akash was working at the time with CIIE, which was an investor in my company. So we used to like spend a lot of times, just discussing things. And I think that was kind of the seed of where all of this grew from. And then back in 2016, when I had to shut down my company and I was in Delhi, Aditya was working on his own thing, and Akash was also working on a fintech startup. Uh, at that time, we just were like, it kind of became sense to kind of rekindle and start something on our own. And then one of the problems at the time or problem or opportunity at the time were co-working spaces. And I remember Aditya used to complain like, I've only like in past 3 months, I've only designed a stool and made it. And he was not very happy. He used to work in one of those fancy Delhi, furniture design studios. And he wasn't like very happy. And then I was thinking about automotive industry. Hey, like cars usually take like 90 seconds. That's how high throughput manufacturing works. So we were thinking of an idea where we could print furniture, just like 3D printing. So ended up like building a CNC machine in my parents' basement and started selling that to co-working spaces. So our first idea was like, okay, we'll make furniture using robots quickly and then deliver to these co-working spaces because they were mushrooming, there were like so many of them coming up because of WeWork's success.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we kind of wanted to get onto it. And then that's around the same time, I think roughly when we were doing our third project, we got into Y Combinator. So that's like a very different journey from, what we were thinking about. We were thinking, hey, we could like become the Delhi's biggest furniture company. And I remember like our first office hours with um, Tim Brady, our YC partner. He kind of pushed us like, why are you not thinking globally? What would it take? And I think there was this mindset shift from, just thinking about, okay, you have made a process which works really well, and that's a replicable process. Like if you can make one robot for making furniture, you can make like hundreds. Why can't you just actually think about deploying globally? So that was like an eye-opening thing, and I think that was one of the biggest contributions I think I'll say of what YC was for us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is super interesting. Oftentimes, whenever I hear the initial founding stories of startups, including in my own portfolio, right? I mean, it's you talk about stumbling into things, right? So it's never one day you wake up and you have this amazing, brilliant insight and you start doing it, right? I mean, you are basically, it's like you're stumbling, you're falling, you're trying something, and then kind of, you sort of get to that eventual thing, which is like, okay, this is cool.
Absolutely. I have like friends who work in the corporate, and every time they say, every time I meet you, you seem to be doing something different. And I tell them back that, it's like I'm obsessed with something different in my field. So yeah.
Great. And then, so, I mean, of course, I think through YC, you guys kind of landed in the US. Still, at least from what I remember, right, the team did not have too much of on-ground experience, prior to YC in the US, right? Like very limited networks, relationships. I know, and I think Akash kind of had studied here, but still, I mean, it's kind of a new geo. And then on top of that, the why now for robotics definitely had not happened at that time,
Mhm.
right? So how did you really go about, acquiring the first kind of set of early adopters, design partners, right, at that time? And I want to kind of really know the details around it, right? These are not like software products, right? I mean, you can't just hack something over a weekend and show it to someone, right? Like, so talk me through that process of that first design partner stage.
Yeah, so I think so. We pivoted from furniture to like doing robot furniture using robots to just doing robots. And the reason why that happened was we were very clear that, okay, this is not the kind of market which we want to be doing. Like our job as founders kind of became, talking to customers for recovering money. And that wasn't great. And then we realized that a lot of these co-working spaces are also not doing good. They had to like fill in all the seats to actually be making money. And the way they would do it, like they were also following WeWork's playbook that, you just delay payment terms and then keep ordering more so that, the vendors are always on the hook. So it was all like we were clear, okay, this is not something I would want to do for the rest of my life. This was very clear that yes, this industry may not be it, even though we found like a lot of initial traction. The second problem, which was like more fundamental, was from the production side. After building like some of these machines ourselves, we realized that okay, it's not just cutting wood part of the process which has to be fully automated. What we are doing is we just pushing bottleneck to other parts of the process. And we'll probably have to go for like a full automation solution. Otherwise, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's and also another thing which was very interesting was that we could not find enough painters in this in Noida, which is like an industrial city, has a lot of migrant laborers. It was very hard, and they would like come for like a week, then not show up, this kept happening. And like when we started talking to other businesses who had like similar problems, this kind of became like an area where they did not have enough people joining in the ranks. And usually, if you, and another observation was that if you go to one of these factories, you'll see only older people doing these things, like especially the things which are very, very dirty. You're almost inhaling fumes, paint fumes the whole day. So it became very clear that this is like sort of a dying industry, and if we can make something for them, it would not just be like making furniture; it could actually be a lot of things. My own experience from the automotive industry kind of came in handy. I saw a lot of paint shops before, and it's like one of the processes which we cannot do without. And so we started building a painting robot even before the pivot happened. We were trying to do that for our own processes, and then that started seeing more success. There was one customer in the automotive industry where we installed our robot, and it basically did half their shift. So it was like a very big sign that yes, if something like this can happen, automotive industry, like even though it was a tier three automotive company, they still have very strict standards. And something which we built for a very low cost, like maybe a few $1,000s, that can do this kind of a thing. And the reason why we even got into it the first place was like I was not very happy with the cost, right? It was too expensive. Like any solution which existed, that was too expensive. I was trying to compare that to, like I'm from Delhi, so I'll try to like compare it with price of a car. So I was thinking, hey, this is a small robot which I can put on my desktop, weighs like, 25 kilograms, and then is as costly as a BMW 3 Series. So that was like a spark, like, okay, there's something where something which we can do, which can be disruptive. And the biggest signal was, okay, how does the future look like? In future, if there are not going to be enough people who will join the ranks of these factories, that means they are going to need robots. Either these businesses die, which is happening a lot in the US now, uh, or they have to like adopt robots. So we were basically trying to like project in the future and then think on those lines.
And then what was that same phase like in the US? When did you acquire your first customer here in the US? And in fact, did the product change, right? Because I mean, the early adopters were, I think, in India, but then I know that you have kind of made a lot of inroads here. So talk to me about that first design partner stage, specifically in the US.
Yeah, so we pivoted in 2019, went through a very difficult phase where we could not get funding. Then 2020 happened. We were still trying to build the what we call as the sixth version of the product. We had like shown it to a couple of people in India, and then we got our first customer in the US, which was a company which was making these alternating dwelling units. Uh, for mostly for California market, where they would put these housing units behind the main house, and they had like a lot of manual operations. So over there, we got a product, got like a problem statement that we need to paint a very large surface, and for that we were building a robotic arm on top of a moving AGV, which would go and sweep, like it would go and paint the large surface. Basically, it was the floorboard, and that would paint that floorboard while it's going in a sweeping manner. The way a janitor would just do like a sweeping action, the robot will be doing that sweeping action. And that was a very, very interesting product. It basically got us to a point where we could actually start selling in the US. We worked with them for a while. Sadly, that company had to shut down. They couldn't raise further funding and they had to shut down. But then we got so many insights from them. It was able to get it to a point where we were like very, very confident, yeah, this is working. The best part about most US customers was they were ready to pay upfront. I think that was something which, I found very different from some of the customers in India. In India, it's actually easier to do demos or even pilots, but people are not, it takes time before we could, get into like a business transaction. Versus in the US, people are even fine paying for it upfront if they see value. And because we were building affordable robots, it just became very easy for us to go and deploy. Though there were other costs attached, I think there's this design phase where you have to like break things so many times. I think we, as an optimist, I did not think on those lines. I was like very confident, hey, this is going to work, but it just, yeah, it took time. Yeah.
And then this ADU company, and maybe like the first couple of the early adopters in the US. How did you kind of acquire these customers, like very, very tactically speaking? Because I think this will be very beneficial for India-based hardware startups that are looking to get that first inroad into the US market. So was it through the YC network? Was it through kind of inbounds content? Did you attend events? How did you get that really, really early traction at the 0 to 1 stage in the US, like post the pivot?
So the first one was through YC Network. The next few we got through exhibitions and word of mouth. I think there was a time when we basically started doing a lot of social media.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things which doesn't really give you instant results. But now we are seeing like constant, customers keep coming back to us because they see some content on social media. They see some robot working and then they start thinking, hey, this is going to work for us. So I think it needs, like for a company like ours, it needs to be a mix of both. You need to be doing enough marketing and also like some sales to begin with. And then, this ratio will keep on changing as we move forward. The internal networks actually help a lot because suddenly you like people have more trust on you. And I've seen this happening in the US more than in other places where if like someone in your network refers you, you get like an instant call.
So like the getting basically the word of mouth, getting those kind of early case studies of customers, that
Mhm.
that sort of has really helped. And then content, I think I'll
Absolutely.
I'll come back to the content side and I have
Mhm.
a question on go to market. I think I'm going to really spend time on that because I think that's what
Mhm.
most US India founders are. That's the biggest challenge that they're facing right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Another thing on the 0 to 1 side, right? So this whole concept of the MVP and the V1, right? So I mean, there is enough content out there on software MVPs, various companies from, Dropbox to, Rent the Runway, and everyone has used various techniques, and there is enough kind of out there. YC has done a lot of stuff around it, evangelizing it,
Mhm.
but hardware is very different, right? So what was the experience at Orangewood? And I know that you're also building new products, so it's almost like a continuous challenge, but I'm sure you're still
Mhm.
doing MVPs in various use
Mhm.
cases. And how would you advise hardware founders to think about specking out that first P1, right? Which is, I mean, you still don't have enough capital, right? You're still trying to kind of validate assumptions. How should they think about it? Any mental models, frameworks, even tactics?
Yeah, so I think, and this is like very counterintuitive. As engineers, you want to make the perfect product and then take it out to the world. Uh, what we have seen is, and I think it's also because of, I have such co-founders who have even pushed me and the rest of the team to actually go out there, even with a product which is like almost working in the lab. And what I've seen is there are like customers who want to see this in the world and they are willing to wait. Some of them are, some of them want a solution which you might be building so badly that they are even willing to wait and help you out to build the product. If you are able to identify those customers, they'll actually let you fail on the line. And there were like very simple nuances, right? Like I remember the first customer in the US. Those guys were very impressed because we would work on Sundays. And it's not something which, like if you're coming from India, it's like very, or if you're a hardware founder, most people would work on Sundays. So they were very impressed, right? Like if you would just come do something. And then there was some customization which was required, and we really wanted to make it work. So we would come and work on Sundays. There were times when things were not working for us. I think we just came out with a prototype which was working in the lab, and then we straight up went to a factory and got an order from them. Uh, but they were very supportive. The fact that they were seeing like we working as hard as they or even harder than them, that was something which just gave them a lot of confidence that these guys are going to pull this off.
I think on the MVP side, right, in particular, I mean, if you can walk us through how do you kind of spec that out, right? Let's say even that painting example or the ADU example, right? I mean, it sounds like it's a fairly complex use case, right? And the customer, it's going to be hard for the customer to give you any feedback or react to it unless they actually see the full hardware, right? And then sort of that
Mhm.
working on the ground, right? Which by itself is probably, could take a few months, might require CapEx, right? So, I mean, in software, it's very easy. You can kind of ship various things out. You can do things incrementally. You can do like
Mhm.
week-long sprints, right? So you can very easily kind of build software in parts. I think in hardware, I'm sure it's quite different, right? How should one, as a founder, think about that V1?
Yeah, so one of the things which I could have done differently was to take enough spares. And things were just like, we basically had to wait because there was a time when, two of us were lifting the robot and then somehow one side it slipped. And then, okay, that's like $3,000 worth of stuff which is gone and doesn't work. So maybe, I would suggest that take enough spares. And apart from that, like there have been cases where we have to like wait for a week, almost like a week for a spare part to come. So because and yeah, like if you're coming from India, it's actually much more easier. Like your time, the time cost changed drastically, from like whatever you were putting a cost to your own time and your team's time, that just changes drastically in the US. So the you'll probably have to educate your team in India also to, see it like almost uh, see it like, okay, you'll have to make sure that even the smallest thing which you have to do, any engineer which you have to do in the US, that has to be timed or, at a certain cost. So we have this example of Martian. If you had sent someone on Mars, you have like limited resources there. So how do you make something happen? So that was like one way we would like tell our team that, okay, this is how you have to start thinking. Okay, you have tools available, but then certain things are not available. So, simpler things like the availability of metric tools. A lot of times, even in Home Depot, you don't find them because they don't stock enough of them. So, these are like some of the constraints you'll have to think around when coming to the US for the first time. As we grow older, it just becomes like a function. You know, if you're sending something to India versus sending something to the US. So we have like different kitting protocols for these things. Yeah, and that has saved a ton of time.
I think the point you mentioned earlier was super interesting, right? Which is the fact that you guys were working on Sundays was really impressing, some of those customers and literally like tipping them over the line. In fact, I wrote a post recently, where I was trying to kind of figure out what's the right to win of Indian startups in robotics. And one of
Mhm.
the things I netted out to that, look, there's a specific advantage that Indian startups have always had, right? Across IT services, software products, SaaS, which was really providing white glove customer support, right?
Mhm.
I think really leveraging, one is I think the mindset. I think India is I think I was discussing it on one of the earlier podcasts as well, that there is a hospitality culture, right? So we're always,
Mhm.
our customer obsession is at a very different level. And we are used to growing up in India, being very hard customers ourselves and dealing with very hard customers
Oh
in
yeah.
any business mindset, right? And then second, of course, is there is a cost advantage as well, right? I mean, you can put kind of teams in India, and so the likes of Freshworks and Zohos, even at a SMB or mid-market stage, are able to provide really enterprise-grade customer support. And so a lot of what you said is resonating in a way that that's it sort of applied to
Mhm.
the deep tech world as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things which, was like a disadvantage to begin with, like we could not find enough engineers in the earlier years. So from like 2019, 2020, and 21, it was hard for us to find engineers. And then suddenly, it tipped over. So I think it was because of maybe due to our social media presence and few other things. Also, the fact that you don't actually have enough deep tech companies in India.
Yeah.
And suddenly, because there are people who want to build something, uh, they are just coming to you. Like I've seen people just giving up like like joining us at even half of their compensation, which was offered to them in big tech in India, coming with us and working. I've seen people who basically worked with us in India, went for their masters, and now working with us in the US. So this is also a pattern which keeps repeating, and I'm glad like we are able to be that kind of a company. I think Infosys in the 90s was kind of like that. So I'm glad that we are able to be that kind of a platform for people who are looking for better careers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think India definitely now has many more potential feeders of talent, right?
Hmm.
You look at kind of a lot of the. I feel there's a lot of latent talent in the public sector units, right? I think people who have kind of been engineers in the oil and gas space or pharmaceuticals, or I think there's a lot of latent talent there, which is I think for them they don't organically think about startups, right?
Hmm.
And I think now with deep tech growing and potentially, I think the next 10 years getting to the tipping point, I think companies like yourselves can now start evangelizing that. Look, I mean, yeah, you can join that large kind of GE technology center, but you could
Hmm.
also join an Orangewood and actually create like
Hmm.
cutting edge products and own the product.
Absolutely. And I think I was telling you the other day, we have like four people who have, MBAs from some of the IIMs. Actually, five, yeah, five people, but they are working in non-business roles. Or, some of them are working like half of their time is spent in non-business roles. And this is a trend which we are seeing.
Moving on, I want to spend a little bit of time on the supply chain side. So, in fact, the post that I was mentioning around kind of Indian startups and robotics, I was kind of netting out to that. Look, I think India has actually good competitive advantage, and I think we should expect to see, Indian founders building kind of global robotic startups, right? And one of the readers actually commented and said that, look, you are missing one nuance, which is in software, it is very easy to ship it, right? Like it doesn't matter. You can ship software from anywhere.
Mhm.
But in hardware, okay, how do you ship it out of India if you're looking to serve global customers? And so really it brought to me the whole point of supply chain, right? So I think specifically at Orangewood, how have you structured the supply chain, the spares, kind of sourcing various things across geographies? Of course, US and India are your core kind of geos from an operational perspective. Are you kind of sourcing from other geos as well? And in particular, the second part of the question is there an opportunity for now startups going forward to really leverage the India manufacturing story, right? And really leverage the India OEM landscape, right? To really start making that as an integral part of their deep tech robotics supply chains.
Absolutely. And, this is something which I would also like to mention that so India has such a strong automotive, background. Like we've been building cars from, in a just-in-time fashion since the late 80s. And the whole cluster of Maruti, then Hyundai, and all of these global companies, and then some of the Indian brands becoming so global now. Uh, at least from where I was, like when I joined automotive industry in 2008, and if I talk about now, there has been such a good shift. That there has been such a massive shift from what we were building back then. Even then, it was huge. Like if I compare it to the US, I not very happy to see the state of automotive manufacturing even in the US. I think Tesla is something which is again, there's like one company Tesla and then rest. But if you look at like the rest of the companies, they're not doing that well. They're not like changing. They're not innovating enough. But in India, I think you do see like that change, and it has a background. It's not that we've not built things at that kind of massive scale before. The only problem which I see is like, okay, there are like these automotive suppliers, and then there are these startups. There's nothing in between, and you're basically living in this particular gap, right? Like, if you're a startup. So, I mean, for us, initially it was very hard. Now we have started to even talk to some of the automotive suppliers who can provide the kind of quality, the kind of manufacturing scale which we'll need probably in the coming years. And I would want to like see some more participation from some of the automotive suppliers, automotive component suppliers participating in the India startup story. I think that is one thing which I am finding it to be missing at this point of time. Uh, but yes, we I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it, right? Because all of these people, all of these ecosystems are, probably in the same city. If I talk about a place like Gurgaon, Chennai, or Bangalore, these cities have, these ecosystems which are in the same place.
Let's take the Orangewood example, right, as a case study.
Mhm.
How do you then ship the robot like out of India? Do you ship parts and do you still assemble it in the core market where the customer is like the US? Or can you actually do the whole thing? How easy or difficult is it to kind of ship things out, from like a customs perspective, from like all the details, receiving it here, lead times, right? So talk to me through a little bit through the details of the supply
Mhm.
chain, right? And especially because you are distributed, right? I mean, your R&D is actually in India, your customers are here, right? How are you kind of dealing with that?
So we assemble our robots in India and in our own facility. And we have suppliers, we have international suppliers. There's few parts coming from China right now. And in a new model, we want to reduce it to a point where we can even supply to some of the critical industries who do not want parts from certain geographies. From a logistics perspective, I think customs is something which has taken a lot of time. And especially when you're new into this, when you cannot afford a custom agent, it actually seems like the biggest problem. For us, I think there have been times when, the things are like stuck in customs for 15 days and then it just comes to you. So you'll have to factor in these things, like anything which comes from outside. The alternative is that you do start building a supply chain, or at least this idea that yes, I'll probably need to do this, in a geography where I can have better control. So this is something which we are working, like this is a constant exercise. It's also not something which is going to happen overnight. And I think expecting that is going to give you a lot of heartburn, which has happened to me. I probably, in my head, I'm like, okay, these problems should have been solved like years ago, but that's not really happened. From a like now we have achieved a point where we can ship something in and it reaches within 4 days. There are certain logistic partners who make sure that they are prioritizing anything which the name Orangewood. I mean, the biggest unknown is the logistics,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to India, because we actually I think that's the part which hasn't really been figured out yet. That's
Hmm.
what I would say.
Especially in the industrial robotics side, do you see at some point very soon where you can actually have a end-to-end manufacturing and supply chain stack in India, or do you still feel that companies like yourselves and others that are now starting up will have to kind of procure components from Southeast Asia, China, something from, I know, I mean, Europe is like really good in lenses and optics. Do you see the complexity of the supply chain or industrial robotics really simplifying with India kind of being the core place? Or do you still feel that, look, it is going to be fragmented and this is actually one of the things that startups will still need to keep doing, which is managing supplies in all these geographies?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it happening like in the next 5 years unless you have, a pandemic level event.
Yeah.
So maybe a war, a pandemic. Unless that happens, I don't think it's because you're not able to change the core of the behavioral pattern of the governments or the administration,
Yeah.
right? So I don't see that it's going to change a lot. What I've seen is there are a lot of startups coming in. So recently, we've started manufacturing, like we just gave a contract to a company which is making motors for us out of Gujarat.
Mm.
And that's something very interesting. And I mean, there's still like a lead time, right? Like in China, you could actually like go to a website, order something, they'll make something for you within a few days and ship it to you. In India, it's just going to take longer because we don't have, it's not commoditized yet. Everything has to still be done. We don't have the culture of building, brushless DC motors. But then, unless like a company like ours is not taking those steps, uh, it's never going to happen. The way I see it as okay, you keep procuring from China where you can procure it, but still have like a supply chain alternative in India, where later on you know that okay, the if you get something produced in India, it's going to be definitely be cheaper than China, and also like you will not be paying so many import duties, which right now is huge for us.
Yeah, it's I think super interesting. In fact, I'm an investor in another company, which is also a hardware company, targeting the US market, the headquarters in the Bay Area. And they
Hmm.
were for the last 5, 6 years having a supply chain, spread across Southeast Asia and mainly in Vietnam. And
Hmm.
now actually the founder took a call to take the entire manufacturing in-house because they said, look, this is now core to us, right? And we actually want to improve our gross margins on the product. And they actually set up a plant in Pune, right? And they did a very thorough analysis in their space of looking at various options. And they said, look, I think this we can pull it off, and actually our margins will sort of get better, right? So I think now I'm seeing that change, right, where founders are starting to have a little bit more confidence in the Indian manufacturing supplier ecosystem. I think there are these pockets. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of action around Pune in particular,
Hmm.
right, around
Absolutely.
space, defense, and all that. So
Hmm.
hopefully it starts. I mean, it has to start bottoms up, right, in specific verticals, specific use
Yeah.
cases, or maybe more enterprising SMB owners slash OEM kind of players in these specific pockets of
Hmm.
geographies in India.
Hmm. One of the things to note is like, you need to get to a certain volume and then suddenly India starts working.
Yeah,
It's
good point.
harder. Like there's a sweet spot between, I don't know, like I think for us, it's roughly like if you're producing things around, roughly at $5 to $10 million range, if you're doing that level of production, that then India just works for you. Everything can be sorted, even the power is not a problem anymore for you.
Yeah.
But then before that, it's like a struggle. Your margins won't be that great. But beyond that point, it's like better than anywhere else in the world because, the cost of labor, the cost of even engineering, everything is so much cheaper in India compared to the rest of the world that you could just make so much better margin.
I think that's a great point. I think that is a very, very important nuance. You're right. I think in the other company as well, I think they sort of came to that point, right?
Hmm.
Where the volumes are now large enough and the even the ASP of the product is large enough, right?
Hmm.
So you're right. I think probably India starts making more sense. But no, these are amazing insights. I think I want to sort of I think this will be really, really helpful for a lot of
Hmm.
Indian deep tech founders because these are the details that don't get discussed too often. Moving on to the go-to-market side, I think we spent a little bit of time on the early days, the 0 to 1, going through the ADU company, through the YC network, and then some kind of
Hmm.
word of mouth starting. I think now you are in kind of year 5, year 6 of the company. I think there is kind
Hmm.
of those early PMF signs. Some ICPs are working. What is the go-to-market for you right now, right? In the US, what's the model? What's working? What's that split between kind of sales and marketing? I think you touched a little bit on content as well. So just talk to us in the details, right, of kind of how you're driving adoption now here.
So the earliest part was through word of mouth, and now we've come to a point that we've kind of exhausted it. Like there are still leads coming through word of mouth. Um, the new go-to-market strategy is to actually start doing exhibitions. That's one place, like especially if you're coming from India, you don't have a base here, or you have like such a small base. It makes a lot of sense to actually invest in exhibitions. I've seen a lot of Indian startups actually doing that. So, and have like a local team, maybe having a sales head is actually like, so this is, a lot of people talk about a lot about like, okay, founder led sales versus having like a sales head. What I believe is like, yes, you like the founder has to be involved, but then if you get someone who is from that industry and also from that local region, that is just going to help so much, like to get through the like first 30, 40 customers. uh, it would just start paying it back, though it's very, very expensive. Like I think people get like a sticker shock when they hire their first sales representative in the US. But then what I would say is like raise enough, it's still going to be worth it. And especially if you have PMF. Pre-PMF, I won't recommend that much. But then once you have PMF, just have like another person, because what I've seen is just like in any other geography, it's not just like people are not just buying your hardware, they are actually buying from the person.
Are there any particular exhibitions or trade shows that you would recommend, especially for kind of Indian robotic startups that they should check out?
So Automate is definitely the one to go to. And they also have like a startup competition that is actually open to everyone.
Hmm.
So you usually get a booth if you qualify for that. So we usually get a booth like free of cost almost, or maybe just co-exhibit with some of your customers. So this is something which we have also done. And then uh like what has worked for us is, you'll always, like, we always found like some interns from our, yeah, from India who are doing some masters in that particular region, and they'll just come and help you out. So that has always helped us. And I think maybe, it's like one of those things that you have to get interns who are very ambitious, who will probably go to the US later on and for a master's, and then they're always like, that invisible hand which comes and help you out. Like, I think that's what your right to win is, actually. Like, all of those people who really want you to succeed, right?
Deep tech is also a very kind of passion driven domain, right?
Exactly.
I think you will
Yeah.
always find people who basically just want to do it. I mean, this is not, you're not trying to, poach people from Google or Meta in this case. You're
Exactly.
basically
Yeah.
looking for builders, right? Who just want to see these products, get conceived and get kind of built in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our pitch is always about, like, okay, if there are students who don't have access to robots, what if, like, within a few years, it, it's at a point where it becomes so easy and affordable for even these students to actually have a robot.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of resonating. We have people, we have programs where we are co-working with, or rather co-developing robotic applications with different universities, both in US and India. I think that has also helped us a lot.
And on the content side, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, right? Again, I want to kind of just unravel that a bit and go into the details. So, A, what is the kind of content that you have seen work really well in the robotic space? And B, what are the distribution platforms, right? That sort of Indian robotics founders should explore.
So it depends, like, you have different audiences in different kind of platforms. Twitter is something which we have used a lot, and Twitter is good for, like, getting investors and other people who will work with you. Like, it's good for collaborators. Some customers, but mostly, like, good for getting investors. Actually, I think 10 to 15%, yeah, almost 15% of our funding till date has happened through people who we just met on Twitter. So that has really helped us. And, you get, like, customer references. It's almost like, okay, if you find someone on Twitter, they'll be connected to someone who maybe they know from other networks, and then they come to you or they send a customer to you.
Yeah.
So Twitter has worked really well for us there. Um, LinkedIn is good for enterprise customers. If you have small businesses, Facebook is the best place. We haven't explored it as much as we'd like to, but Facebook is where a lot of, I think that the generation which still is taking decisions in small businesses, there's a lot of those people are on Facebook. And that's a good way to reaching out. We haven't done it as much as we'd like to. I think most robotics companies have to become a content company before, they have to become like almost like a media company before they become, like actual commercial products. And case in point would be Boston Dynamics. Like, before 2019, for the first 40 years of their existence, they did not sell any robots. They were just showing it off. They were, they were everywhere. I think if a current generation, if any kid talks about a robot, they'll talk about Boston Dynamics. And what they did was to spark that imagination, right? Okay, this is possible. With us, like, the idea was, if, like, the funnier content actually goes in, like something which actually does not have to do with work, that actually gets us a lot of hits. And we've had customers, even large enterprise customers, seeing us through that and then coming back to us for like order. So it's very interesting. I think it's still unfolding for us, but what I believe is, like, it's marketing is something which lets people imagine their own solutions. And they start fitting your hardware or your robot into their own process. And that's what you would actually want. Like, you're still selling something which is going to become, ubiquitous in future. It's not there yet. So you want to co-build as much as possible with the customer. And because once the customers are co-building, it's like their own product. And that's what you would want. And we've had, like, some case studies where we did, like, one video and then got, like, a very large enterprise customer because they basically approached us after seeing that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel that in robotics in particular, I think marketing and I think a lot of these social media videos, I think are super powerful. In fact, to share one of my own experiences, I actually ended up investing in a defense drones company.
Mhm.
When I saw the video of these sort of five founders, very young, straight out of college, doing like a demonstration in Gurgaon somewhere, and they kind of just posted
Mhm.
it, and they actually got a
Yeah,
bunch of investors on Twitter
yeah,
to
yeah.
that. So you're right. I mean, it actually really works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where, you want to like connect with other believers.
That's great. On the team side, how have you split the team between the US and India, in terms of, functions and how should sort of US India cross-border deep tech founders really think about that?
One of the interesting things about, how the global talent is looking, and it's a little bit sad, but again, that's what the reality is. A lot of talent actually does not stay in India, especially when they want to grow. And it would make a lot of sense if you could, like, if you have those kind of relations with them, that they still come back and work for you. And there's something which we've also like, we realized it after a point, when people just wanted to work with us. And if you have like some kind of plan where, like ESOPs, where they can keep continuing the work, like even after their masters or even after they move to US, it makes a lot of sense. Our current split is roughly, 10% in the US, rest of them in India. We actually have like three developers out of Africa as well. So
Wow.
that is, yeah. Again, it's like, okay, deep tech is attracting talent from all over the world. And we're very, very happy with them. Even though like it's like remote development on our robotic software stack, but it actually works really well. I think the way deep tech founders should think about is, I mean, they should optimize for best hiring practices. Like that's what, or rather hiring the best people instead of, and this is like always, there's like, you will, in your head, you're always calculating, right? One person in India versus one person
Yeah.
here. It's never like a long-term solution, right? Like the person in India is also connected globally. They will find another job which will pay them equally. So it's not going to be like, if they are good, they are going to find a job anyway in a, in another geography. And this has happened to us as well. So you need to have like a very long-term plan for people's careers as well. If they're good everywhere.
What
Yeah.
I'm hearing is that there is this whole kind of classic wisdom, right, which we saw at least on the software side with services, products, SaaS. That okay, your engineering team is in India, so sort of so-called the back end is in India. Founders start visiting the US, get some customers, then typically you kind of start putting your kind of sales teams here, right, and then kind of take it from there. But it looks like in deep tech, what I'm hearing from you is because the talent is more specialized, right? And you need very specific kinds of people doing each job that you have to kind of be more flexible and more nimble. And so in a way, it's almost like following the talent instead of following the geo.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see like the economics of tech, right, it's always disrupting the last thing.
Yeah.
So it would make a lot of sense moving forward that even the deep tech kind of gets paid enough like to be at par, at least with like it, not at par maybe, but at par at, let's say, the European standards, maybe
Yeah.
not the US, but maybe the European.
And then you guys are obviously very deeply embedded into the YC ecosystem, and I think are those sort of really early generation Indian founders to sort of go through the YC program.
Mhm.
Specifically today for Indian deep tech founders, how should they look at YC? Right? What is the value that they can expect from it? Like, is it relevant for them? Right? You look at things like robotics, looking at drone companies, space companies, right? Like various areas of now deep tech, energy, EVs opening up, right? How should they look at YC?
One of the things which I feel what YC's contribution has been is to make us more ambitious. And the kind of network it gave us is we didn't find that kind of network anywhere else. So that really helps. Like even if you're a YC, like even if you do YC for something else, just getting into it actually is helpful. Like even if you do something else later on. And I've seen people who've done like YC for a different company or rather a different idea, and then maybe the company shut down, gets acquired or whatever, but they still keep working. They still are part of the YC ecosystem. So that is very, very helpful. On the demo day, raising money on the demo day was the easiest experience I've ever had. So, that would save you so much time and energy if you are going through IC. Yes, there are, I'm seeing a lot of issues with, where the geography is, like your company, where it's domiciled. There are problems, but I'm sure, they're like moving forward, there would be, you'll find solutions to them.
Final question, and this is
Mhm.
something which is a massive area of interest, which is fundraising.
Mhm.
Now, I think deep tech fundraising itself is very hard, right? I mean,
Mhm.
most VCs over the years not like to invest in hardware startups. Now, of course, I think it seems to be changing. You're seeing much more interest now. So that's one. Second, I think for US, India, deep tech founders, very limited networks, typically in the US, right? No most investors. For a US, India deep tech founder, what's the playbook for fundraising in Silicon Valley?
One of the things about, especially about the Bay Area, is that you can be included very quickly. Like if people see you as, someone not as an outsider, you kind of get accepted very quickly. So one of the things is like start doing demos here. And I've told this to founders who are not only from India, but from elsewhere as well. Like I've recently, like I'm someone who's been a Bay Area evangelist. I've actually, like, I keep pushing people to move here, and there's a very good reason for that. I think in terms of like as a builder, you want to be around other builders, and this is like one place where it's not like you're not alone in this. You always get this feeling. And even if I'm someone, I call myself, more introverted, but I really love going to events because you will find like your peers, someone who's probably struggling with the same problem or has struggled with the same problem, and they are ready to share that advice. I haven't seen, similar, uh, like this is like the kind of behavior which makes it so special and different. People want to help each other out, even their competitors. That is just unheard of. Um, like my advice would be to, come try to, like, if you're coming here, just spend at least, more than 1 month. Try to do as many demos as possible. And yeah, I think these are the two things which I would say, like, their chances of getting funded is much higher if they are doing that. If they are being in front of more people, it just changes their odds.
But especially in terms of connecting with VCs who have the highest likelihood of investing in deep tech, right? I mean, these are
Mhm.
typically not. I mean, sometimes I now you're seeing kind of mainstream firms also getting interested in it, right? But there are some people who kind of have a sort of stronger thesis on various areas of deep tech and even including angels as well, right?
Mhm.
Are there specific tactics? Are there specific kind of events or things? Locations where they kind of hang out. Like, how do you connect with them, right? If you're not coming in here, you don't know any of these people, right? Like, how do you even get in front of these people? Are they hanging out in all these kind of events where you're doing demos?
Yeah, there are few places, but you'll be surprised, it's not actually the formal events. There are a lot of informal events. There are a lot of parties where a lot of these conversations happen. And one of the things about Bay Area parties are like they are not, almost no one is drinking, right? So it's a very different game here. People are having like very, very, very deep intellectual conversations in these places, and you'll be able to find those people who will either very interested in helping you out, or maybe they are investors themselves. um yes, it will take like a little bit time to get into these circles. um but yes, it's most of these are like very inclusive as well. So, I've never found like problem in, even going to someone's home party when I was not invited, but, one of my friends just wanted me there. So that phase is a little different. Apart from that, yeah, there is obviously the Four Seasons Hotel in San Francisco where, in the lobby on I think it's on the eighth floor where, you'll find a lot of investors just hanging out. That used to be a place, I think, pre-pandemic. I'm not sure if that's the case now. Then there are like few places in Sand Hill Road where some of these people hang out. Stanford campus is one place which I've like just run into people which, were like either investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more about like, it's about like how you are being perceived, right? If people see you as someone they can trust, if you are in these places, it just increases your likelihood for getting an investor on board.
Yeah, personally, I've seen over the last 10 years, I think Bay Area is one ecosystem where the chain of intros can spread very fast, right? So
Yes.
I think if you can find that one or two those early believers who just kind of feel excited about either you or the company or both,
Mhm.
then the way that they start working their Rolodex and the way kind of they can pull in other people, it can happen very
Mhm.
fast, right? And that's very unique to the Bay Area ecosystem.
Absolutely. And the best part is like people here kind of know other people who are like that in the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's, I mean, if it was a network, it's like, okay, this is like a node where everyone is here, but then they also know other people who are like that in the rest of the world. And then that's what kind of helps you to spread the news.
Correct. No, this has been an amazing conversation, Abhinav. I think all these insights are, I mean, this is gold, to be honest. I don't see, like posts and podcasts on sort of US India cross-border deep tech. And so, I mean, these are sort of very, very hard earned. And I've seen you guys, for many years really grinding it out in the trenches. And I think I'm really excited for where Orangewood can go from here. And so thank you so much for taking out time for this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Yeah.